think we're missing about a few people.
Why don't we start, though? It's a little after 1 and we only have 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And this is really cool stuff that we're going to do, so let's not waste a minute.
All right.
This is a picture of, for those of you who are classicists, and those of you even who are not, you guys know who those people are? Telemachus and Mentor. Mentor comes to us from Homer and his great story of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And when Odysseus had to leave his home in Ithaca, that's another whole story because I was just there, and went to fight in the Trojan War, he left his son, who was less than a year old, in the care of Mentor to raise his son as he would want him raised. And the neat part of the story is Mentor was really the goddess Athena in disguise as Mentor. So you get some idea of how important the masculine and the feminine is, even in the beginning of the word mentor. And all of us have been mentored. We use the word all the time this morning. I heard mentor bandied about all over the place. And yet, I wonder, how would we define mentor? So Oni and I are going to take just a couple of minutes and ask for your participation. Then we're going to go through some slides and ask for your response, and hopefully get this all done. So my job is, who here has been a mentor? Raise your hand. Great. Please, as I point to you, as your hand is up, call out one word that you think identifies mentor.
Developing skills and values.
Developing gifts and values. This is absolutely an oncology group. Okay. Who else has one word? Wisdom. Love it. Who else? Discipline. Failure?
Oh.
That's interesting. You're going to have to come back and we'll go over that. Guide. Anything else? Challenge. Supportive. Proponent. Okay, one more. Example. Yeah. Great job this morning. And Oni is going to do the same thing with mentee. Who here has been mentored? And she'll ask you for a single word.
Oh, mirror?
Seeker.
Seeker, okay. Who else has a suggestion? Recipient? For mentee?
Curious.
Curious, okay. Pardon? Humble?
Good.
Persistent.
We heard that.
Confusing? Okay. Confused. Anything else? Grateful. Lost? Okay. Great. Malleable. Goal directed.
That's enough.
Okay.
Okay. All of those were terrific words, and thank you for offering them. I'm really interested in your word.
Well, I can only say one, and I want to say success and failure.
Yeah, success and failure. Isn't that the truth? How much do we learn from our successes or failures? Maybe more from our failures. Amen. So these are the words that you put up about mentors and mentees, and then Oni and I had put up some slides that we thought would be fun for you to reflect on. This information comes from two places. JAMA had a wonderful series of articles on mentoring, which I read and found fascinating because it elucidated mentoring in a way that I had not appreciated, although I think I've been a mentor and I've been mentored. And then Weill Cornell University, the dean has implemented a whole program throughout the entire medical school for mentoring so that everybody's mentored and being mentored.
And
being a mentor and being a mentee.
And they've established a mentoring academy.
And a mentoring academy, they're supporting this, they're paying for it. So this is really a wonderful step, we think, for the institution. Maybe you'll have the same situation. But here are the set of slides, and I'd like to stop with each slide after I read it and have your reflection. This is from JAMA. What is mentoring? Mentoring is usually a formally established, written, dyadic, two people relationship between a more senior and junior person, initiated by either. The mentee is preferred, involving direct interactions to help with the acquisition and integration of new learning, the management of transitional states, key for all of us, and maximizing of the potential of the mentee. It is an intense, personal, non-sexual. That's a pregnant pause. Excuse the double entendre. Because of the time of, because how we see men and women relating. Relationship with a high level of commitment. Here's what it's not. Mentoring is not simply peer support. Although we use the word peer mentoring, it isn't really. Tutoring, teaching, coaching, supervising, advising, counseling, sponsoring, role modeling, preceptoring, which require less personal commitment. So often this morning I heard the word mentor being used in much the context of what we're saying here it is not. So let me just open it up for your conversation and reflection. What do you all think of this definition, and have you been in that kind of relationship? Anybody is welcome to comment yes or no and to comment on this, please.
I feel very lucky to have had really great female mentors in the past, and I think one thing that stands out to me in this that is not really mentioned is honesty. I've had a lot of people being like, "That's great, you know, we support you," and just like being very positive, but that's not reality. And so for mentors to say, "You know what, this isn't a good idea," you know, takes a lot of effort, but that trust is actually probably the best thing I've done about that.
That's a great comment. I completely agree with that. Nice thought. Other comments? Mira. I would agree with you. And the time that I spent at the NIH, for example, I was never mentored. I spent 6 years there. And I think that the whole concept of mentoring is a little bit newer, especially brought into the medical framework. And I don't know too many people, maybe anybody, who had exactly this kind of very defined, disciplined relationship. I thought this was a very interesting definition. Any other comments about this particular? One thing that jumped out at me was management of transitional states. Transitions are really hard. How do you go from being a medical student to an instructor? Or from an associate to, or assistant to associate professor? That's hard. How do you compete for the job of chairman? Do you have people that are helping you in those transitional states? That's when you are most vulnerable and likely to make a mistake, I think. And so, mentors in transitional states.
I think to piggyback off that idea, so full disclosure, I'm biased. I think Harmer is probably one of the best mentors I've ever had, which is why we drafted him for this session. So I had never come across this definition before about management of transitional states. And I happened to, you know, have Harmer become my mentor right when I began as a first year attending. So Dr. Formenti introduced him to me, and it has made a world of difference in my focus, and I think probably in my career trajectory. And I don't know why more often we are not made to really seek a mentor or told the importance of it, especially when we transition, when you leave from being a resident to starting out as an attending, or when you leave from your internship to become a fellow. Those are key times when there's a lot of change, and you could use someone to direct you. One of the things that Harmer did for me was he forced me to sit down, and he said, "What's your mission?" And I said, "Oh God, I don't know, I don't know life." And he kept asking me, "What's your mission? Write a mission statement, right?" And I said, "Oh my God, this guy keeps," but I'd smile, I'd be like, "Oh, I have 2 boys at home, writing this mission statement is like, not really my
mission is to get home and have dinner, please.
Exactly, and get enough sleep. But I eventually did it, and I have to say, now you will hear me. If I've had a conversation with you recently, I've probably told you, write a mission statement, because it changes everything. It gives you a different lens, and I think the idea of management of transitional states and maximization of the potential of the mentee. Sometimes people take on others and they say they're mentoring you, but really they want you to just do their project so that they can get another paper and then kick you off the paper or whatever it is. But those two things are really key, and I think it's
one of the reasons I think people don't
Yeah.
ask for it is it's a tremendous vulnerability.
Yeah,
When you ask to be mentored at this level of intense personal relationship, you're very vulnerable. Can you trust that person? Do you know that person well enough? Or does that person have a track record? We'll get into this in a little bit. But there are people who will be known in your institutions as great mentors. They will have done it for a long time. They'll have a reputation. Probably trust those people. And the other point that I wanted to emphasize, older, younger, one of the benefits of being older, mentoring a younger person is you can see the distance. You know what's going to happen. You've been there. You've gotten beat up back then, and you know how that feels and where it was. So if this is enough on this slide, we can come back to this. You're welcome to take it and use it. I would recommend it. Brandon.
I think one of the most powerful words to use in that whole process is the vulnerability. And with the mentees that have so much trust in the mentor, for this to be an intense personal relationship, to be, and the bravest you could possibly be is in your vulnerabilities and then to express them. So that's a tricky place to find.
That level of vulnerability and responsibility on both sides has to be held in the highest level of consciousness. You cannot be unaware of that. Keep that in your mind. It's a great point. Here's our next slide. This comes from our dean at Weill Cornell, and this is one of his ideas, and let's put his statements up here and then ask for your response. A good objective listener, sensitivity and empathy, aware of cultural and gender issues. We heard a lot about cultural issues and how they were problematic in the service of global oncology. Role model in terms of compassion, integrity, enthusiasm with a higher level of commitment than role model. Approachable and patient, nurturing, giving environment, and sacrifices. So this is what the dean at Cornell thinks is the requirement for a mentor. Your comments?
is one more important than the other? Because this is the perfect human being on this list. So, if your mentor isn't approachable or patient, but they, are a role model in terms of compassion, which one trumps? Does one trump the other?
Yeah, I was just gonna comment that, lots of times you look for someone in your exact same discipline,
Mm-hmm.
but then when you look at that list, it has nothing to do with discipline. So I know people have had success with looking outside their discipline to find
That's a great point.
I would really agree with that. There comes a time when somebody in your discipline is necessary because that's the career you're going to have. But somebody who knows process, and that's not discipline specific, but somebody who knows process. Why do you have a mission statement? In the session that we did this morning, why do we put so much emphasis on the why? We heard about dreams and how important they are. Dreams are translated into reality, but they're a part of the unarticulatable passion that we have that drives us to do what we do and gives us the strength to persevere through the obstacles and difficulties that would otherwise derail the activity. And that is not job specific. That is process specific. And that kind of process is so valuable. You can find a mentor outside of your field if they understand that kind of process.
I was going to say, these are all really good things, and I think inherently flawed and don't necessarily have all the qualities.
Right?
So I think that sometimes what I'm learning is that you have to find different people who fit those roles, those different roles. And so you have almost like a panel of mentors for different phases of life.
Such a good point. For example, and the way I would phrase what you said, and I can't say it better, is that be careful that you know what you're asking to be mentored in. It's so easy to be dazzled in medicine by somebody who is amazingly good at what they do, and yet their personal life is in disarray. You don't want that mentoring in the personal disarrayed life, and yet that can influence you if you accept without judgment the talents that you're seeking that person for. So be careful with what you're asking to be mentored in. And both people need to be aware of what that is. I think that's really important.
Along with that, and I think in kind of comment to both this slide and the last slide, I think one of the biggest challenges is that, you know, the selection of a mentor, as the JLM definition said, is mentee preferred. However, what you're asking of that person is rather a lot.
Yeah.
And is rather a lot of subtle things that are not very teachable, or so you're kind of asking for something, but oftentimes it's not explicitly stated what you want. And so
Maybe you don't know.
Maybe we need to be, yeah, either you don't know, or maybe we need to establish more of a culture of establishing upfront expectations for these relationships.
I completely agree with that, and so does the dean at Cornell, who felt that what you said is not only true, but so important for the future of the institution, that it's being done throughout the institution. And you can be trained to be a good mentor. It's not just something that comes naturally. And there are certain restrictions and criteria for being a good mentee. But anything else that you'd like to consider on any of these?
I think I do want to hear the aware of cultural and gender issues, and what you talked about previously in the previous slide, that it's a non-sexual relationship. So we've heard a lot about Me Too. There have been a lot of articles regarding that a lot of men see that they are now scared to mentor women. So I just wanted to hear, you know, the audience Rohini, you said specifically, I've had a lot of female mentors. Do the women here, the men here, have you mentored women, or have you been mentored by women? And what do you think contributes to the success of that, you know, intermixed mentoring relationship?
So I have I have a little sister, but I also do big brothers, big sisters, and I feel like it's a good kind of policy if I were to be in a situation where I'm mentoring a woman, I want to pursue the same kind of tactics. You know, like basically with your little brother, if you go out, you're in public, you know, there's always somebody else around. You know, you kind of protect both people, and you know, avoid having conflict like that.
Please. I agree. And the question, at least in my own situation, is I put myself in the mind of the person with whom I'm speaking, and what does she think? What's she worried about? And when I start a mentoring relationship with a woman, the door will always be open, and she'll be sitting closest to the door, and I won't be. For example, until we have a absolutely rock-solid relationship, which may take months or a year or two. And then it can be done in a different setting. But those are the kinds of things that I think are an appreciation of that kind of discomfort that might come with the conversation is really important. You can't be honest otherwise. You can't focus on what's important if you're worried about something else. Can we go all the way back, Shakina? Shakina, I don't have a gun, but I would love to have you come over anytime. I mean, the door is open.
But I think it's, thinking about, I think that one of the things that people can think about is, are you providing mentoring opportunities that people of all genders would be comfortable accepting? Because I think that those are the, conversations on the golf course, conversations at the shooting range, conversations like on the basketball court. Like, there are a lot of women who would be comfortable in all of those scenarios, but are you biasing your choice of mentees or sort of the activities that you want to do toward one gender or, any gender, let's say. Let's not use gender binary necessarily. But I think, yeah, I think I would feel uncomfortable if one of my male mentors treated me differently because he sort of felt that I was thinking of him, that he could be predatory. And that's not to say that, these predatory issues aren't real in medicine or in every field, but I think it's just starting there does feel.
It would feel kind of odd to me if I went to meet with somebody and had what I would presume to be a confidential conversation and he wasn't,
Well, then you can close the door.
right? So, but I
Sure.
think that there's the if you treat those situations differently, if you have a male or a female mentee entering the room, then I think that's great if you have that policy, but I think to avoid the perception of, you treat one gender differently than the other, maybe it's helpful to think about how you maybe that's just your policy in general for any mentee.
These are terrific points, and it's not just gender specific, it's
Yeah.
person specific. Some
Yeah.
people are more comfortable in one situation or another. So being sensitive to the other person and doing something that makes them as comfortable and approachable as possible is a good idea. Can we go on to another slide here? Because I don't want to miss it. They're all good. One more question? Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say too, I think with, gender dynamics in mentorship, one thing that, at least my mentor and I in the military have talked a lot about, in police and male, is this idea that we can't always have strong female mentors. Like, sometimes it's just straight up not gonna be available,
True.
in your set. However, what can be available is male mentors, or the other way around, who think, I think, who take the time to really think about how to mentor a female.
Right.
Or female mentors who really think about how to mentor a male.
Right.
And I think this idea of, I think we do need equality in activities, but at the same time, recognizing that there are separate gender issues that people might need mentorship on, for example, taking maternity leave, or something that just inherently is a gender issue. And if we go too far to kind of like unisex, equal type mentoring, we're gonna also just shove those issues under the rug.
Thanks. It's a good place to end.
Just
We'll
a-
go
Okay.
next slide. Another slide for choosing a mentor. Enthusiasm for mentoring. I hope I didn't cut you off too quick. Experience. It takes time to become a good mentor. It just doesn't happen because you want it. You've got to have a lot of experience. Reputation. Funding source for mentoring. Cornell now has a funding source for mentoring. They pay for the mentor's time. Fairness, track record, personality, and chemistry, how people get along. Yes?
I'm just really curious, how does the funding source for mentoring work?
It-
And what department pays for people to come in? And I'm just curious how that was operationalized in those meetings.
So I think they're giving incentives to faculty who have demonstrated mentoring across. So I don't know yet. It's very new, but I can get more details and share it. But
Yeah, the
they've
dean got the
estab-
money.
Yeah. They put someone in place. So just to describe it quickly, they put someone in place in charge of the Mentoring Academy, and they are rolling out programs every month. They have a talk, a lecture, just the same way you would have a grand rounds. The whole community is invited, and they talk about issues specific to mentoring. So that's one thing that they've initiated. Then they have smaller talks where they'll say, this is someone coming. We would like you to Donna's point, choose someone outside of your field to interact with in a smaller group and glean knowledge from them. So those are some of the things that they've done, and I know that they're also giving out financial incentives to individuals who have demonstrated mentoring.
Please.
I was wondering about folks around experience.
I think that means just how long have you been doing it? What kind of training have you had? And this is something that never occurred to me. How do you get trained to be a mentor? Well, you can. If you use all those criteria that we put up on the first slide, that's a lot. And maybe you're not suited for that. Or maybe part of it you're not suited for, so being aware of what you're good at is good, and that will come with experience. But you just can't come right out of the gate and be a good mentor, I think.
Just to follow up on the comment about experience and quotes, I think it sort of goes to like what was said previously about not only experience in the field, but like lived experience. So do you see the world through the way I see the world, and how can you help me navigate those barriers when they come up, you know, as a woman of color or as a minority, or, you know, can you help me in that regard? And if you can't, then to Chico's point, having a panel kind of help you navigate those different questions.
That's really important. And those are life experience mentoring that doesn't require job-specific talents. You don't have to be a scientist, for example, in those kinds of roles. And finding people like that are really, really wonderful. I found one or two of them, and they are very special people when you find them.
And if you can't, then like having a mentor really,
Yep.
having that person find a mentor.
There's a neat biblical phrase, which I like. Ask and you will find. Seek and you'll find. Ask and you'll receive. You have no idea who's out there that could help you unless you ask. If you sit around and say, God, where's my mentor? It ain't gonna happen. But if you start knocking on a few doors and say, who's out there? There's some help. Anybody hear about somebody can do this or that? You will not believe. Who says, yeah, I know somebody can do that, or I can do that. So it takes, you have to take the initiative, which is why the mentee was the preferred origin of this relationship. But it's just amazing what you find. Yes, Tom.
One more thing I'd like to add is about the mentor is who's willing to give you the time.
Yeah.
Because time is often precious in your academic phase or anywhere else. So also you should be able to give time
Yeah.
to the mentee. So I would add that to the list.
And I would too, and if you take recall the first list we put up, the time requirement was greater for a mentor than anything else. Teacher, tutor, department chairman, or what have you. Academic mentoring, how to give it, how to get it. Determine how the mentee likes to spend time. Good mentors do not promote their own agenda. That will be one of the biggest mistakes I have found in somebody who thinks they're being mentored and then the mentor takes the credit for the work. Have regular interactions for feedback, proper introductions, financial support. Here's an interesting one. Do not become friends. We're going to come back to that. Be able to terminate a mismatched relationship. Somebody earlier said they were able to do that. I congratulate them. Be explicit in who gets the credit. Remember, separation is necessary. Some really interesting stuff in here. Who wants to comment? Why not become friends?
Introduce with honest feedback.
Good. Doesn't mean you can't care deeply for that person, but resist the friendship. And that's hard for me to do. I want to be her friend, but and I think she's just great, but I'm aware of that role that I must play to be effective.
Do you think that makes the mentor-mentee relationship somehow time limited?
Has to. Which gets to the last point, separation is necessary. One of the problems that I've heard from some people is the mentor hangs on way longer than they're needed. Mentees off on their own, doing their own thing, department's working, they got a new job, the mentor is still calling out. Separation has to go, and it's good that that be recognized by both sides, and that perhaps that can be planned. You've done such a good job, you're about to get the promotion. When you get the promotion, let's have one more celebration and then it's over. That kind of conversation is really good.
So can they be friends after that then? So should I go? Should I accelerate my promotion?
You can add the last line, become friends.
Yeah. Being explicit who gets the credit, that's really important. Because if you have somebody who's a senior person, scientific person, and you're doing a lot of work in that department or in that situation, and the credit is, in your opinion, inappropriately delegated, that's a disaster. Dean Choi of the medical school told us of his experience at the NIH, which was basically my experience at the NIH. He worked for 2 years, discovered a new gene, and had it taken away from him by his chairman, who published a paper, and it took him years to get over that. So that's really important. Yep, we got 2 more minutes, guys. Here's the benefits for mentoring across the mission and why it's a good idea. Increased productivity. You'll want this because you'll do more, better work. Faster development of appropriate skills, clinical research, service, educational, all of them. Greater personnel retention. People are happier if they're properly mentored and they feel that they have a secure position there. More rapid promotion and focused cultivation of diverse leaders. So these are the reasons that Cornell wants to do this. And so I put this last slide up. On the left, you see the beginning where most of the work is done by the mentor. That's where the balance comes. As you go through, it's pretty even. The mentee's putting an awful lot in. And by the time the relationship is over and you're about to separate and then become friends, the mentee is doing more than the mentor. And I thought this is a nice way to look at who puts in, who gets out, and what the time frame for this relationship.
15 minutes, the last 15 seconds, sorry.
15 seconds.
Yeah, just a suggestion, not related to this subject. You can create a kind of list of emails from the people who have been here, just because I would like, for example, someone else who do something similar to what I'm doing. So if you guys can maybe, not right now, and we have time, whenever everything is over, you just maybe send out a list of emails of everyone who was here.
Oh, yeah.
You can network.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons for ICEC and this conference. Find ways for people to get together and help one another, and some of those relationships may turn out to be mentoring. Yeah, it's a great point.
The previous slide, you showed that the benefits of mentorship across the mission.
Yes.
What I found is, personally, is the mentor himself has some self-actualization of self-improvement areas. So that is the biggest benefit, I would say, as a mentor is in that whole process while you're trying to be a good mentor. Even for the mentor himself, it's a journey for improvising and self-development.
It's a wonderful point, and very important that we end on that the relationship is bilateral. Both people benefit from this, and that's really important. Thank you. One more point. Yes. You decide. I think it's a conversation between the mentor and the mentee. The mentor may say, listen, it's a good time. You've done all the things that we set out to do. You've done a wonderful job. You're about to get the promotion. The mentor might say to that person, maybe we should have our last session. And that could be agreed upon. Or the mentee might say, no, I need you a little bit longer. Let's do it this way. So a mutually agreed upon time. But then that separation has to come. It will be good for both.
I think that's why, to that point, it's important when you embark on the relationship to have an agreement. And I think there are actually some forms. There was an institution that created forms for when you're entering into a mentoring relationships, the onus is on the mentee to say, these are my aspirations and my goals. And maybe when you do realize you have hit those goals, that would be the closing point. But hopefully we've given you all some food for thought to assess your current mentoring relationships, some tools to going forward to set up, useful ones, and yeah.
So thank you all for your participation and for helping us with this session, and hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you.